Kimberly Kirkendall is a seasoned expert in international business and manufacturing operations. In this episode, we discuss the delicate balance between visionary and analytical minds in successful companies. Kimberly takes us through her opportunistic journey, starting International Trade Resources podcast, which delves into the complexities of international trade, the educational insights on topics like export, compliance, and supply chain management. Kimberly shares her inspiring career path from running factories in China to advising governments and teaching supply chain courses. Her unique perspective emphasizes the importance of understanding management dynamics, the entrepreneurial mindset, and the crucial role of technical proficiency in one's career. We'll also hear about the challenges and lessons that Kimberly faced in securing clients, managing project flows, and navigating the practicalities of being paid for one's ideas. Kimberly also details her passion for teaching, her ambitions, and the resourcefulness that has driven her success in international business. Our conversation is packed with valuable insights for both budding entrepreneurs and seasoned professionals looking to excel in the global market. As always, if you find value in this content, please subscribe to our channel. And now here's my conversation with Kimberly Kirkendall. Enjoy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Beyond Fulfillment podcast. I'm your host, Dave Goulas, and this week, my guest is the founder and president of International Resource Development, Inc., Kimberly Kirkendall. Welcome, Kimberly.
Hi, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here. If you could, for everyone, you've got a very, very interesting background from your backstory of how you've been doing work in Asia for the past several decades. Can you just tell us your story and how it got started up until where you are now?
Sure. Yeah. Hello, listeners. Thanks for joining us, and viewers, watchers too. I'm used to audio podcasts. But my relatively shortened version is I spent my 20s running factories in China. This is the late 80s. I graduated college, international business and Chinese, and wanted to work in manufacturing and operations, which was one of the reasons I wanted to go overseas. I felt like it would be easier for me as a woman, to get into a deeper, challenging position overseas than starting in the US and working my way up. So I went to China, ended up being hired by a US company that had two contract factories there that they had set up and built. And they had had an American before me for 2 years with 30 years experience in manufacturing, setting up those factories. There were no foreign owned businesses at the time, not even joint ventures. This is mid 80s, late 80s, very new for China to get into this space. So it was wonderful. I, got a phenomenal amount of experience. I was the only American in the office, team of Chinese staff. I was 22, 23 years old when I started there. 2 years in Shanghai with the two factories that were in a village outside of the city, and then I became head of their Hong Kong Asia Pacific headquarters for another year and a half, 2 years after that. So my career really started in manufacturing in Asia, and so that's always been one of my core competencies. I moved back to the US, worked for a different company on the West Coast, managing all their Asian supply chain manufacturing suppliers in Thailand, Indonesia, China, Korea, Taiwan. We had an office in Hong Kong, which I ended up like managing for a few months at one point. So there was all the supplier management, development, raw materials. We were in a very highly regulated product. So there was a lot of quality control and safety concerns and testing that needed to be done. So that was, again, great educationally for me in terms of learning. I then moved, I was on the West Coast, moved back to the Midwest, which is where I'd grown up, worked for a group of catalog companies when catalogs were first growing, and learning how to run that kind of a business. So distribution, inventory management, imports, I had a team that we oversaw all that. We had our own fulfillment center warehouse, but then we also bought another catalog. So we were using a third-party fulfillment center. So Dave and I have had some great conversations about this. That's how I dipped my toe into fulfillment centers and shipping and all that inventory control and that side of things. I became a CPA. I honestly thought if I went back and got an MBA, I would kill my teachers after that experience. They would be trying to explain something to me, and I'd be like, no, dude, I did that. That's not how it works. So, but getting a technical skill in accounting, would really round out, my operations background and manufacturing background. So I did that, worked for a regional CPA firm as part of my accreditation, did some consulting for them, due diligence for acquisition of a factory, company valuations. I worked with a lot of their manufacturing clients since I already had that experience. I was CFO for one of their clients for a while, and then I started my own company over 20 years ago. The first 10 years of that was, let's say, 2000, 2010. Really, a lot of our clients building their plants in China, site selection, factory setup, negotiate with the government, hiring teams, all that kind of stuff, setting up distribution centers, supply chain, a lot of supply chain. I get into the moving money part and some of the tax part, although I know Chinese tax regulations better than US. And then in the last 10 years, I've done more, I would say, general international trade and supply chain. I have Chinese clients that have set up in the US. I am an advisor for the New Zealand government. I help New Zealand companies come to North America, manage their supply chain, trade compliance. I've taught supply chain at university. I do training for, in the US, we have these MEPs, Manufacturing Excellence Partnerships, in every state. And the one that's in Ohio, I do training for them on operations and supply chain and a variety of things. And I consult for them with some of their, especially startup companies. I have client projects in Mexico right now. Some of the New Zealand companies I'm in the middle of things with. I have a US clients factory in China, Mexican company with Chinese customers, and I'm in Europe. So I put the international and international trade, right? So I have a very international life.
Okay. Wow. Wow. Yeah. Appreciate that the whole story there. Lots to unpack. Let me just start from like the beginning of your career because we see so many times and so many people coming out of college or around that age where they're not sure what they want to do. And you seem to really know right away you wanted to go in manufacturing. You had a plan going into college and then you went right to China. Like how did you know so early that's what you wanted to do?
Yeah, it sounds like it always sounds like that now in hindsight, right? And at the time, it certainly doesn't feel that way. I wanted to do international. I grew up in a very small town of about 7,000 people. I'm the seventh generation of my mother's family in this town in North Ohio. And I was a big reader. And both my parents, had wanted to travel and then didn't end up doing that or doing that to the point that they wish they had. They kind of got into marriage and home ownership and kids and all that kind of stuff. So I think I also inherited some of that wanderlust a little bit. And so I really wanted to live overseas. I wanted to have an international life. So when I got into college, I was originally looking at more like industrial organizational psychology, and then I realized that would be an undergraduate, a master's, a PhD. And I'm like, no, I don't come from a family with that kind of money. I need to make money like way sooner than that. So I switched into international business. I'd taken Spanish, but I thought again, I don't think that's, a unique enough language to make me competitive. So I took a class in Asian cultures. I felt the most simpatico with the Chinese culture is kind of a very Midwestern culture. We speak in analogies. We are indirect and kind of polite with each other. Family and relationships are very important. So I thought I could do that. I grew up with that. I can do that. And so that's how I ended up international business in Chinese. And then I also really felt, for young women out there, especially, I really felt like so many women that I was seeing, professionally would start a career And then they would end up, they and men get married and have kids, but it seems to impact women's careers more, when they have children, their decisions about what they're doing. So I really felt like I need to go overseas right now. I before I get, life kind of takes me over and I don't have these opportunities, I'm going to go right now. So I was really, really focused on that. And so that's what, took me to China, took me to Chinese, and then took me to China in the beginning. And manufacturing, I love problem solving. I'm what I call pattern-minded person. So I like patterns and things. Accounting is like that. Manufacturing operations is like that. And so I really wanted, and I also encourage students or anyone, that's in a career development phase, the more technical you can be in your profession or whatever profession you want to go to, the better it is for you. You never want to be in a room of people and you don't understand the technology or the details of the problem of what your colleagues and peers are talking about. So I always wanted to be really, really trained in something tangible and technical. So I felt like manufacturing operations, trade compliance, accounting, I've continued in my career to pursue more technical capabilities as I've developed my career. So I think that's a piece of advice I would give kids too.
Okay. And so you made the decision, the Asian culture and language resonated with you. You made the decision, right? And then early 20s, you're the only American with a full Chinese staff operating factory. I mean, that's pretty high level stuff for someone that young in their career. Were you always just like a high performer and kind of stood out from the rest when you put your mind to something?
No, I was a beast. Nobody expected anything out of me. I mean, honestly, I don't mean that in a bad way, but I was a B student. I wasn't in AP classes. I'm intelligent, I believe, and I was intelligent then, but I wasn't comfortable being openly ambitious because again, it wasn't that wasn't what people saw for me, or expected from me. So I felt like I kept it to myself, right? And then if I couldn't accomplish all those things, nobody knew that I'd even tried, that I was even going to try. But the benefit, I think, of coming out of an environment where the expectation or the environment situation expectation is relatively modest is that there's no risk in trying because nobody expects you to do it anyways. So it's not like everyone's rooting for you to go to med school. And if you don't make it into med school, they're all disappointed. No one expects you to get into med school anyways. So if you don't make it, no one's shocked, kind of thing. So I think that was a blessing for me. And then I do have a tendency to, I'm a very planned, organized person, but I do have a tendency to jump at a certain point and figure it out. And so when I went to China, to work I studied in China for a year before that company hired me. And then when I went to work for them, I'd never even been in a factory. So I didn't know if it was going to be 300 square meters, 3,000 square meters. I mean, I genuinely had no clue. And it was going to China wasn't scary for me because I'd been there as a student. I'd lived there and I'd gone through that kind of adaptation. But I remember being in the van with a couple that my Chinese guys on the way to the factory, and I looked like I was 12. I mean, I had long blonde hair and pink cheeks, and I'm on my way to the factory and I'm thinking, holy crap, whose idea was this? And I always joke, like, whose idea was this? Oh yeah, mine, right? But I would say to myself, what are they going to do? Shoot me? Like the worst thing that happens is I get there and I'm not good at it and I can't do it. And then they say, well, you screwed up, you weren't any good. And they send me home and I'm no worse off than I was before, right? But at least I tried. And so about 6 months into the job, because I was good at it. I like I said, I'm an analytical person. And so the production schedules and managing the inventory control and the production line and all that stuff like was logical and made sense to me, and I could understand it. So 6 months into the job, I said to the owner of the company, it was a family-owned business, and once I knew they liked me, right, I said, why me? Like, why me? You had this guy before with 30, 40 years experience, and I no idea what I was doing. And he said that what they realized with him, the previous manager, was that he struggled to adapt to the culture. He didn't speak the language. He didn't know how to work with people. He didn't know how to negotiate with the suppliers or manage the team or any of that. And they really felt from my interview with them, and I spent like a whole day interviewing with them. I was able during that interview, they would say, this is our plan for China. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure that's going to work that way because that's not what the Chinese do. That's not how it works in China. Because as a student, I didn't have a car and a driver and a translator. I wasn't living in a hotel. I had to make do, right? I had to figure out how to get on a bus. And we were on scholarship, like $50 a month. How am I going to supplement that? I learned hustle the year I was a student in China. I learned major hustle. So, but it also taught me like how to get shit done in China, how to get things done, how to work with people, how to negotiate, how to make it happen. Because I didn't need a translator, I didn't have a driver. I was right in the thick of whatever it was I was doing. And that's why they hired me. And the owner said, we figured we could teach you the manufacturing, faster than we could teach somebody else how to deal with everything that is China. So that's how I ended up in that position. And it worked. And, it was a great start.
Wow. So it's almost, you could say, like that your lack of resources forced you to be resourceful. And that turned out to be a big benefit because of what that experience, the growth that it created for you.
Definitely. And I think it's actually a disadvantage for people when you have a plan, when you have a backup plan. If you can't make your career work in those first couple years out of college, if mom and dad are there with a room in the basement for you and they'll cover your car payment and you can always go work for Uncle Joe, you're just not going to be as hungry and resourceful as you are when there isn't that backup plan, or when it's so unattractive to you, that there's no way you want to go there. Then you're willing to, and I've cut out parts of, when I was in China after I finished the year of college there, I ended up in Germany. I got a job in China, it fell through. I ended up in Germany. That was a nightmare. Came back to the US. I had a lot of setbacks. I had a lot of setbacks. And there were a lot of people saying to me, why do you keep pursuing this? Why don't you just get a job here in Ohio, go work for this company or that company? Why do you keep doing this? I really wanted it because I really felt like if I don't do it now, I never will. So that was definitely an advantage for me, that perseverance is a lot more impactful in your life than intelligence or capability or a lot of other things. If you just keep at it and keep persevering, you can make it in most things.
Freight shippers, are you looking for a better experience shipping less than truckload? Are you tired of unpleasant surprises, reclass, reweighs, and the invoice always being higher than the quote? Well, experience the difference with SPI Logistics. I joined SPI as a freight agent to offer a better experience to our 3PL customers, and I'm now offering that same experience to freight shippers nationwide. You get the same personal service you've come to expect when you deal with me, and I've got a whole team of experts that help with all aspects of the transaction from start to finish. Click the link below, or you can email me directly. Thank you. And so, as part of your intro story, you talked about starting your company, International Resource Development, or so around the year 2000.
Yeah.
So you had quite a long, I guess you could call it corporate career or not, not running your own company. Do you think that was an advantage to you to have all that life experience and corporate experience before actually, founding your own company?
I do think it is. I think there are probably some businesses where it doesn't make a difference, but in consulting, you need credibility to be a consultant. You need experience, and that's what you're selling is your knowledge, and experience and credibility. So having a corporate career before you go into consulting and gathering all that knowledge and also learning how companies work. Every company has its own culture and a business model of how things get done. So working for companies where you learn how decisions are made and how management interacts and what management's goals are, when you then come in as a consultant, that's really great information to have when you encounter a new client, because you know from the 5 companies that you used to work for, okay, I'm not going to assume everyone on the management team agrees on this or gets along or supports each other, or that the junior person I'm working with is really has the support of their boss even. And what's driving this project? Is it maybe it's ego on somebody's standpoint, maybe it's budget, maybe it's efficiency, maybe it's risk. So having all of that experience really allowed me to understand and support my clients better, as well as having the knowledge, that I was selling and delivering to them. So I think it was very, very helpful, to have that experience before I started the company.
And in the early days of the company too, right? What was it like securing clients? Because when you listed some of the clients you have, I mean the government of New Zealand and some of these other like bigger corporations. I mean, clearly you've got an established company, you've done very well. But in the very beginning, what was the process like in terms of securing some paying clients?
It's hard. And I get people that come to me, and want to start a consulting business 15, 20 years ago for Japan or India or, particular industry. And I always tell them, you've got a 3 to 5 year runway. I mean, it's not, especially in consulting, because you're not going to get 5 projects right out of the gate. And if you get one project that's all of your time, when that ends, it could be 6 months or a year or 2 years before the next one. So deal flow, managing the balance of, for me, my sweet spot was like 4 to 6 projects. And in the first 10 years, I had a couple people in China working for me. I had somebody in the US working for me. And so, because those were the years that China was booming and everybody was going to China. So those were my busiest years. But yeah, and then you've got to figure out, how do I quote this job? Do I do it I don't work by hour, I work on project based, and a lot of this stuff you learn the hard way. You learn because you try the alternative and it fails, or you don't get, you put in more time than you get paid for, or they're not happy, or you really take some time for you to figure out, not even if you have the experience that you're selling, how do I sell that? How do I charge for it? How do I manage my time? How do I manage their expectations? All of that is part of having the business. And so in the first couple of years, I was really not even completely international business supply chain China focused. I was doing some more of the accounting side that I had gotten with the CPA. And it was really me following the lead of the market, because as China started to really open is when I, was there to fill that need. And there really weren't a lot of other people at that time who had my experience. So I was able to really take advantage of a lot of those opportunities and grow with the business. But you definitely have to be comfortable with a certain amount of risk and ambiguity, on the unknowns. If you're going to have your own company, you're always learning what was the core of my business for those first 10 years is very different from what I've done in the last 5 years. So you also need to, meaning the type of projects and the type of clients that I'm getting. So you also need to look at the market and say, the market's changing. And as the market's changing, how do I change to meet it? And is what I have still valuable? Because fundamentally, at the end of the day, you've got to want to do it and somebody's got to want to pay you to do it, right? So you may want to move into a certain area. You may say, wow, I love sustainability. I want to help companies develop sustainability models. But is somebody willing to pay you to do that? They may love it. They may think it's a great idea. They may want to do it, but are they willing to pay you to do it? Is a completely different thing. So that's where it helps to not be kind of the type of person who sugarcoats or rose-colored glasses things, because you got to be pretty clear-eyed about who you are and what you have to offer and what the client's really looking for and what they're really willing to pay you and who your competition is and what they offer and so forth. You can't go into it so passionate about what you want to do that you're not being cold and clear about, does somebody really, yes, what I'm doing is amazing, but is somebody really going to want to pay me for that? Is it really valuable to them enough to write that check?
Okay. Wow. And that's an interesting paradigm, because oftentimes too with entrepreneurs, right, and someone really trying to launch their business, you hear words like passion and optimism and really just needing to put your all into it. But then you also balance that in terms of being brutally honest, particularly with yourself and your skill set and your value. And like you say, being cold about, is someone even really willing to pay for this?
Yeah, it's some of the entrepreneurs I've been working with lately. I was telling one of the startup founders, and he's in his mid-20s, and I said, I asked him, I said, what do you think you bring to the table in this company? And he tried to kind of answer like he was going to be good at all of it. He was going to have to do, the selling and the product development and the accounting and the ops. And I said, I'm not sure your temperament is good for all of it. I said, what you're good at is quite frankly what I'm not good at. I am somebody who walks into the airport, looks at the lines, and my brain goes to, where are the problems here? Which lines are longer? Where should I be standing? Is security look bad? Entrepreneurs tend to look at opportunities, which is not quite the same thing. So he tends to talk about his new product, and he's so passionate about it and he's so excited about it, and that's amazing. And it's amazing because if you were me, you may spend too much time thinking about, where could this go wrong? And is it really viable? And some of the best companies and best products and best ideas were created by someone who started down a path to innovate, or innovate a process or create a new product that everyone else had failed at, and they were in some ways too naive to even realize that 10 other people had tried before them. They just thought they had this idea and they had the ability or whatever it was. The reason they succeed is because when they get to the point where everybody else kind of failed and walked away, they figure out a way to get through whatever that is. They develop a new technology that's needed to get through that, or they figure out how to link different technologies, or how to pivot and appeal to the customer in a different way that these other people didn't. So to some extent, hanging off the edge of the cliff by your fingernails, with that entrepreneurial personality, is what fires your brain and keeps your nerves on edge, and that sharp thinking, that you figure a way climbing up that mountain that other people didn't figure out, right? And that's not me. I mean, I'm very good at problem solving. I'm very good at finding problems. I know I would be way too wound up in all of the things that could go wrong and being super over prepared, that I wouldn't jump as fast as this guy would jump and then figure it out. Now, that's not to say he's going to be successful in the end, but I do value, and I think we all value that personality in an entrepreneur. And it's an ability. It's positive that they have that, thinking. It can also mean that they put all this time and money into it and it fails. That happens too. So yeah, I wanted this guy to understand I'm not good at what he's good at, but conversely, he's not good at what I'm good at. And he, in the moment, he needs me, but eventually he's going to need some other people like me to keep him on track as the business grows. Because if you only have that kind of thinking running the company, then you're going to have cash flow problems and inventory problems and, one product and not multiple products. And, you need balance, right? You need a balance of skill sets in a business as it grows.
Yeah, yeah, so important. And I appreciate you pointing out the distinction too, right? Because oftentimes too, we see really successful companies that have a mix of both, and having the right people in the right seats, meaning the visionary and that the person that needs to have that almost naive optimism, and then balanced out with some analytical people that are really looking out for everything that's going to go wrong, and having that balance in each area.
Yeah, it's important, and I think that we all need to look at our, again, kind of cold hard look at yourself and say, where am I, in that, what do I bring to the table? And how can I find other people who fill in the things that I know aren't my strength, you know? And that's how you end up with a long-term successful company.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, another thing that you launched in recent years was the International Trade Resource Podcast. And I was fortunate to be a guest on the show just recently as well. Can you tell what made you decide to start a podcast?
That's another funny thing. So again, I'm kind of opportunistic, I guess, about things. Things happen, or people make comments to me, and then I go, yeah, that's a good idea, and then I run the numbers, and try to figure it out and see if it passes my reasonableness test. And I decide how much I'm willing to kind of commit to it, and then I do it or I don't do it. So I had on my list of things to do, like over the last couple years before I started it, a podcast. And I part of what I struggled with is, what do I want to put out there that's different from what everybody else is putting out there? And I like to say I'm a frustrated teacher. My consulting is teaching. I want my clients to do it with me. I want them to learn, because then when I walk away from the project, they can actually carry it through, right? And I'm always like lecturing at universities and mentoring students. I love teaching. I really do. So when I thought of my podcast, I thought I want to do something that people learn from, you know. But it was on the back burner, and all the clients and everything else is going on, and it stayed on the back burner. And then one of the companies, I get calls from startups in international trade a lot, saying, "Hey, we're starting up, and we wanted to pick your brain about, I'm an expert in fintech, but I don't really know our client base in that are importers and exporters. Could I talk to you, once a week for a few weeks and pick your brain? I'll pay you X or whatever." So I had this guy that I was doing that with, and I was saying to him the best way for them to market their company was indirect marketing, where they sponsor a podcast, or they have other people write articles, or they sponsor a newsletter. So it's not like they're trying to sell something themselves by doing it directly, as much as they're genuinely putting like good, responsible for putting good information out there, and people are attracted to that. So then what he said to me was, "Well, why don't you start a podcast and we'll sponsor yours?" Like, okay. So within like weeks, I started it, and I figured out, like, found a podcast engineering company to do the back end, because I thought I don't want to learn that right now, maybe someday, not now. And I have so many contacts in international business that that was easy for me. Like, talking to people I know, ex-clients or friends, or, other professionals, and saying, hey. And the focus of the International Trade Resources podcast is education in international business. So our guests come on, and we talk about, like, what are the challenges in a very. We had one that went up this week on what mistakes do exporters make, right? And how can you not make those mistakes? One of our top episodes, which has hundreds and hundreds of downloads now, one of our top episodes is one of the most technical on export compliance. When you export product out of the United States, you have to be compliant with federal regulations. You can't sell to Iraq. Right now, Russia, there's companies on the denied list. There's certain types of products. So we had a speaker on that. We've had speakers on freight bills. You get freight bills, you should audit your freight bills, or have your 3PL partner audit your freight bills. Sometimes you get overcharged, So we had somebody on that. Distributor agreements. What do you need to have in a distributor agreement? What do you need to have in a supplier agreement? And Dave here was talking to us about fulfillment centers for foreign companies that are exporting into the United States and, don't have a presence here, because that was a topic that some of the New Zealand companies were asking me about over the years. How do we find a good fulfillment center? We're a small company. We don't have a lot of sales history in the US. And here I find Dave, who's set up a business for exactly this kind of problem, as well as domestic companies. And I'm like, oh, this is fantastic. So I wanted him on our podcast to talk about, how his business is different from some of these other fulfillment centers, and what kind of brought him to this, and how companies should look at that. So I'm thrilled with the podcast. Honestly, we find that it's been out almost 2 years. It'll be 2 years in about 3 months now. And people, every month, we have more downloads from past episodes than new episodes. Because once people find us, they go back through the library and listen to the other ones, other ones that also are educational. And I love, sometimes I get comments. Some guys, we had one on customs brokers. How do you really use your customs broker? They can do more for you than you know. And some guy commented, I'm a customs broker, and this was all very accurate. Like, thanks, dude, I think. Because your assumption was it wasn't going to be accurate, right? Or they'll send me a message, and they're in logistics, and it's on logistics, and they're like, this was good. And I'm like, well, I was really waiting for your approval, so I'm thrilled you gave it to me, you know? So, but it's nice. It's nice when people who are experts in that area, who are kind of expecting to hear less than ideal information, actually go, shit, that was really good, you know? So I'm proud of that. I'm happy about that. So that's how my podcast got started. That's what it does. And we do have also a program for university professors. They can use the podcast as like extra credit in class, like international business classes or supply chain classes. Because we all know, if you've ever taught university, you know how underpaid professors are for the amount of work they do. So that motivated me to give them something for free that they could use in their classes that wouldn't take them any more work.
Ah, interesting. Okay. All right. And Kimberly, if people want to get in touch with you and learn more about the services you offer, or the podcast, or anything else, what's the best way that people can reach out to you?
LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn, Kimberly Kirkendall, and you can message me on there. That's really the best way to get my attention. The podcast is International Trade Resources Podcast. It's on Apple, Spotify, Podcast Addict, all the major hosts. If you don't have them, it's also on Buzzsprout, which is where we upload it to, and you can listen to them there. And there's a way there to kind of send messages too, but LinkedIn's better. I use LinkedIn like kids use TikTok. It's my only social media.
Okay. All right. We'll link all that in the show notes for everyone. All right. Well, Kimberly, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. It's a great conversation. We really appreciate it. And that is all the time we have for now. We will see you next time.